A storytelling legend, a trailblazing world traveler, and perhaps most of all, a champion of curiosity. Kerry Sanders visits us in the Stream Center to look back on his illustrious career. We're going to talk shop, we're going to take your questions, and we're going to do it all here live from the Stream Center on WFLA now. Good morning to you folks. JB here with you across all platforms, and let's get right to our featured guest. Folks, we are in the presence of greatness. We're going to hit the applause button here for, there he is, everybody, former NBC News correspondent, retired NBC News correspondent, Kerry Sanders joins us in the Stream Center. And Kerry, thank you for coming in today.
Absolutely.
It is so great to have you. How is retirement? That's the first question I want to ask.
You know, it's a really hard word to use.
I would imagine it's weird to hear, right?
It is. It is. Right now, I'm kind of like on an extended vacation. We're about 2.5, 3 months at this point, and it feels really good. The funny thing is, you know, news is a 24/7, round-the-clock, nonstop, always go, go, go. There are no real days off. And I did it for 40-plus years. Now, I thought, there's no stress in my life because I know how to deal with this. I deal with this every day. There's no stress, and I'm just really good at that. But in these months now of this retirement, extended vacation, I've actually had people say, Kerry, you seem different.
Yeah.
And it may be that is what I'm not dealing with. I went to dinner last night with a very good friend of mine, Tom Stebbins, who was a cameraman that I worked with many years here in the Tampa Bay area. And not once did I have to reach over to my phone to see whether I missed an email, whether the phone was on silent and I needed to check if I'd missed a phone call or anything, because I don't have anybody tugging at my shoulder.
You have unplugged. You've unplugged from the news cycle because you don't have to worry about that next assignment, that next call.
I'm still very interested in what's happening, but it's no longer my responsibility.
Wow. Well, considering that there's so much, there's no way over the course of this live stream, folks, that we're going to be able to break down every great moment in Kerry's career, but we're going to do our very best. And I have a list of questions that I'm going to be asking Kerry, but we're also going to be featuring your questions. Hello to everybody joining us on multiple platforms, including Facebook Live. We've got YouTube Live. We're even live on TikTok as well. Hello to our TikTok audience. We're going to be taking your questions. I really hope as well, whether you're watching live or after this has been live, perhaps some journalism students out there, people who want to become reporters in the field of journalism, perhaps they're watching or listening as well, because we're going to get into a lot of how the news industry has changed, what Kerry has seen, some of the highlights, as you're seeing here in the center of your screen. When you look back, look at that. Kerry, when you see some of the highlights of your career, what has that been like over the last few weeks?
I got to tell you, I'm looking at some of these videos, and it's hard for me to remember where that's Iraq right there. And that's just a story that we did about, and there I am in the Bahamas. That was crazy, deciding to do the running with the bulls, but survived it. That's over... let's see, I was in the helicopter over Honduras. So anyway, yeah, I've had an incredible opportunity to do these amazing stories that, you know, television news allows you access to things that you wouldn't otherwise get a chance to do. Sometimes they're the most difficult, horrible things that happen in our society. And other times they're just a peek behind the curtain that nobody gets a chance to do. And so, the opportunity to not only get on a nuclear sub, but to let them allow me to drive the nuclear sub, that only happens because you happen to be a reporter there doing a story. You don't get on a nuclear sub. You certainly don't go out to sea on a nuclear sub and then to sit there. They even let me climb inside the torpedo tubes. And the interesting thing is all of that, which I got a chance to do, you can't do anymore because they had a tragic accident off of Hawaii where they surfaced and hit a fishing vessel that had a bunch of Japanese students on it. And not that there was just a reporter at the controls, but things changed. The Navy will no longer allow somebody who is just along for the ride to hop in the seat and do that kind of stuff. So I realized the chances that I've had to do these sorts of things are unique, special, and a true treasure.
You have quite literally been documenting human existence over the last several decades across, and I want to make sure I have this right. You've reported in all 50 states, You've been in 65 countries, is that
Correct.
correct? And 100 named storms. I'm going to ask you more about storms a little bit later on. I want to shout out some folks in our comment section, including Jay, Lynn, Amy is joining us in our comment section. We're going to be getting to your questions coming up here in a little bit, folks, as our audience continues to build. You can use hashtag HeyCarry, hashtag HeyJB, either of those two hashtags. And on this screen here to my left, your questions and comments will just appear brighter on my screen and allow me to animate them on screen, including, let's go to one. Jane, we'll go to Jane really quickly. Says, I'm not from the area, have no idea who Kerry is, but I can tell just from the first few minutes of talk and video clips that this man was an inspiration and amazing at his job. Hashtags for us both. And again, we have an international audience, so people who might not be familiar.
I wonder where Janae is. Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you something interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Janae might be in the United Kingdom, but NBC, actually a surprise to me, at certain times in my career, my stories would air all over the world. And so a story that I would do would air on, during Tom Brokaw's time, would be on CNBC in Great Britain. CNBC has a channel there. I remember in the year 2000, I went down to cover the Olympics in Sydney, Australia. How far away can you get from the United States, okay?
Right, yeah.
And I'm walking on the street and somebody stops me
And says
in there, and I can't do an Australian accent. Hey, mate, you're Kerry Sanders. And I was like, how would you know that? And they're like, oh, well, the Today Show is aired at the time, which is our morning, their night, and it's kind of a cult following, and people would watch it on Australian TV. So there was actually an audience around the world. So I don't know where Jane is, but it may be that our broadcasts were in her community as well.
Well, everyone will have an opportunity here if you're joining us here on Facebook Live. We've got a lot of folks joining us across multiple platforms, YouTube Live, TikTok. We're going to get to your questions. I want to start to get into some of the questions that I've had for you, things that I've been thinking about since you and I, met for the first time. I believe it was last year. And it was very, very brief, but I remember I said that we were going to be moving into the Stream Center. I remember telling you, man, it would be so awesome to have you in here so that I could pick your brain and just learn from you and just be in your presence. And it's just so great that you remembered our conversation and that you're back here today. Kerry's going to be doing some other stuff here at the building at WFLA today. But the first question I want to ask you, and this goes back to my roots when I wanted to be a reporter, when I was studying to become a journalist. And it's a very simple, fundamental question that every reporter should ask. All journalism students out there, this is where you begin for me. If you're talking about journalism 101, reporting 101, but you perhaps are best equipped to answer this question given your incredible career. What makes a great story?
A great story? Actually, every story is great. Every story is great. You begin with, hopefully, your own curiosity. And so there's an old line, everybody has a story. It's really true. Everybody does have a story. It's your curiosity that will, peel back the onion and give you the layers of the story. And then ideally, you can put it together in a way that has the audience going, that's just plain interesting. I had no idea. I listen as much as I can to other people doing stories. I listened to one the other day about a young woman who had bad teeth and all the challenges that she had in her life until she got dentures and had her bad teeth removed and all the challenges she had. And you'd think to yourself, how could somebody's poor dental habits be a story? But everybody has a story. And so I find that the most important thing in terms of storytelling begins with the curiosity that you have. And sometimes people don't even know they have a story. You have to pull it out from them and spend time. I mean, not everything happens like that.
So then how much does it come down to that individual reporter to do that story justice, to peel back the layers of the onion, if you will, and get to what the root is of that story that makes the story compelling?
Okay, so I started in terms of what I would call real media. Okay, I mean, I was young and I worked at a radio station, but
the good old days. I started a newspaper,
and you are all alone. You go out as a newspaper reporter and you're all alone, especially when you're young. It's kind of hard. But when I made it into television, it is a collaborative effort. It's you. It's the cameraman. At the network level, you have a sound man. You also have a producer. And so if you're working in sync with your team and the person you're talking to, I mean, not everything is on camera at that exact moment. You spend time with people. Hopefully, you get a chance to talk to them on the phone before you even show up. You do some research. You get some background. What I did not do in most of my career is I didn't write down questions. I just came and chatted with somebody. And if you have a conversation with somebody and you're doing, as we're doing right now, eye to eye, and there's a camera here and there's lights here and there's a microphone there, at the beginning, the first person you're speaking to who's never been in front of a camera can feel intimidated.
Sure.
But more often than not, I wouldn't say to the cameraman, rolling. I wouldn't do that. It would look like
make it any more official than it has to be.
Yes, it would look like they were fidgeting with stuff and everything else. And finally, this happened more than once, somebody would say, well, are we going to do this now? And I'm like, we're done. And they were like, you mean you've already recorded that?
Wow.
Because it was a conversation. And it wasn't me looking down at my notes going, and who did you call? And why did you do this? And what did you do next? It was more the way you chat with people. And I've actually had friends accuse me of, hey, Kerry, stop interviewing me, you know? I mean, but that's just conversation to me.
Right, sure. And young reporters will know, myself included, when I was first starting out, that sometimes you will do an interview. And then after you're done with the interview and you turn off the camera and then you have that conversation with the person afterwards and then you're talking to that person for another 5 or 10 minutes, you're thinking, man, I really wish I had this conversation on camera because this, in a more relaxed setting with them off camera, all of a sudden I'm getting the best sound, I'm getting the best material to use. So you're talking about breaking the ice before even having the opportunity to start the official lights on, lights, camera, action type of interview.
Exactly, because it puts people off, you know? And honestly, one of the biggest changes is that cell phone technology, there's a generation now that has grown up on camera. I mean, from the time they can remember being a baby, they've had a cell phone in their face with somebody taking a picture or rolling a video. And so there is a generation now that actually is not intimidated by the camera. The only thing that may put them off is they feel like, oh my God, how am I going to sound and look on a national broadcast? But they're not intimidated by the idea of there's a camera there, which actually, you know, that's a reflection of how society's changed. Everybody's got a cell phone.
The technology has changed, and also to the ability to access different quadrants of the world, different corners of the world that you have been able to not just visit, but to document.
Well, imagine this, okay? When I started in television, this was a dream, okay? This was next to impossible, that you would be able to go to the Amazon.
Right.
And do a live broadcast.
Right, which...
It's like, that's just not going to happen.
You did that.
I did do that.
And how do you get a signal out from the Amazon?
Well, what you find is that many things that are going on in the Amazon include the destruction of the Amazon, searching for oil. There is, in the middle of the jungle, far from any civilization, there are cell phone towers. And some very brilliant engineer, he was a graduate student in Israel, said, I wonder, and this was years ago, he said, I wonder whether you could take all the different cell phone signals and get a video signal and split it out, because video's big and cell phone signals are super thin. Whether you could take a little portion of all those cell phone signals, send out the video, and then recombine it back in New York or back in Israel. And he invented something that's now a very common piece of technology. That was called LiveView. There's Dejero. There's all these other companies that have built off of his technology, TVU and everything else. But we found a cell phone tower down there. And with that one cell phone tower, we could put our whole story together and go live. And it was eye-opening. I mean, I can take you back to the earliest television station that I worked at, where this was videotape. Called it 3/4 inch videotape. Everybody used the exact same videotape.
I learned on 3/4 inch.
And when we would get our stories completed, if we were not in the city, because this was in Jacksonville, if we were outside, we knew the bus routes, and we would put our tapes on a Greyhound bus, and the Greyhound bus would bring them back and then run down, get the tapes, bring them into the station for the editor to put together. Think about how far we've come from using, and that's my earliest days. Overseas, if we were in the Amazon, we'd have to go to a major city, Iquitos, Manaus, something like that, where they have phone service, and we'd have to find a telephone company that had a telco line so that we could then arrange for thousands upon thousands of dollars for the videotape to be played out through the telco line to then go through the telephone system up to a satellite and bounce back to New York. But one of the big differences is you would buy those in increments of time. And so if you shot an hour's worth of video, that's an hour's worth of telco time. Very expensive. And very often what would happen, I can give you examples when we were in Haiti, when the crisis was, there's been a lot of crises in Haiti, and unfortunately it's still in crisis. It's a country that may be the saddest place I've been to on earth because of the eternal hope of the population and the consistent problems that they've faced, whether they're political, whether they're natural disasters like earthquakes. I mean, they've just had so many problems.
Another, yeah.
But we would go to the Earth Station. This is years ago in the 90s. We'd go to the Earth Station, which was way out in the middle of nowhere. It was a giant dish in a little hut. There's chickens and stuff running around in the middle of nowhere. And there were only 2 phone lines there. And so one phone line to dial out and one phone line for the engineer to be talking to the people. And you're like, I'm at a phone company. How's this possible? There's only 2 phones. And all of us would show up there. So it would be NBC, but it'd be ABC, CBS, CNN. There'd be local stations there. And so you buy a block of time and then everybody splits it up.
I was going to say you had to have to schedule
You have 5 minutes.
That's it.
To feed your story. And so one of the tricks I learned is when a reporter narrates their story, when they lay down the track, as it's called, you generally, this has changed a little bit, not needed as much, but back in those days, you would say 3, 2, 1. In Haiti today, da-da-da-da-da. The reason you did 3, 2, 1 is the editor is moving really fast in the edit with tape.
And scrubbing to find that moment.
And what they'd hear is, boop, boop, boop. They'd hear your 3, 2, 1, and they'd cue it up. But what I learned is you would say 3, 2, 1. In Haiti today, more violence, the military ruler, Raul Cedras, blah, blah, blah. You did all that. You would do that line a second time. And everybody would look at me like, why are you doing that a second time? I said, because I learned something from some of the other veterans, which is when it's going up on a telco line, if there's a problem, you can't rewind the tape and do it again. You only have 5 minutes.
So you're doubling up.
So you double it up. Everything is redundancy. And of course, in my career, especially with my time with the military, I learned that redundancy is very often the key to your success because things will fail and you need to have a backup plan.
You're speaking my language because people in this newsroom know me as being someone who always has a plan B, C, D, E, F, and G. And so that's a huge part of what we do because there's a million ways it can go wrong. And usually there's only one way for it to be able to go right. So you have traveled the world doing live shots from the Amazon. And by the way, I'm thinking of Willy Wonka with Mike TV, by the way, when they're transmitting and they're putting it all back together on the opposite end. That is absolutely wild. What's the most remote place you've ever been? A place where you stood around and you said, oh my goodness, I'm standing here.
That's a very easy one.
Okay.
North Pole.
North Pole.
North Pole. Because there have been more people at a weekend NFL Bucks game
than there have been to the North Pole.
Ever.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that I did something that really only Superman has done. I circled the globe in 15 seconds.
You did the walk.
I walked around.
You did the walk.
Okay, so remember, the North Pole is not land. It's just ice floating up there. So you have to use all types of technology to know that you're actually at the North Pole.
Exact spot.
Right. And satellites are not really set up for the North Pole.
Why would they be?
Right, because nobody's there.
It's remote.
And you don't need a satellite to be able to. So there's very thin opportunity to get like a phone call out and a little bit of
Well,
navigation.
you didn't go live from the North Pole.
Impossible.
It's quite literally impossible.
It is impossible.
Right.
You can do a phone call. But that's it. And the phone calls are kind of hairy to begin with. So found the location. They got the pole out, put it up. And then I'm like, well, I have to circle the globe. So I ran around the pole, and I can say, legitimately, I've been around the world in 15
seconds. Christopher Reeves, other Superman actors. Kerry Sanders. You ain't got nothing on Kerry Sanders. Live with Kerry Sanders on WFLA Now across all platforms. So great to have Kerry joining us in the months after his retirement, but he's still calling it a little bit of an extended vacation. Florida is a special place for you because it's home.
Yes.
So as someone who has traveled the world quite literally for their career, walked around the world in 15 seconds, and you're back here in Florida, and you would always come back to Florida. It's really home base for you.
Yes.
What does Florida mean to you now, especially having looking back on your career and the fact that you've now completed quite literally an illustrious career?
Florida is one of those rare states. It's Florida, Texas, California, and New York that deliver an outsized amount of news. In Florida, so much news, in part because we have such an incredibly diverse population. We have, if you understand the state of Florida, you know enough to know that North Florida is the South, South Florida is the 6th borough of New York, plus an entire international community, including a diaspora from Cuba. You have so many different things that happen in the state. But people have always asked me about, like, because crime news is very big, and Florida seems to have a tremendous amount. What is it about Florida that makes it seem like it's strange, what these crazy things?
The Florida Man stories.
Yeah. In fact, they joked when I retired on the Today Show.
I saw the
Florida Man retired.
Yeah, it's great.
But there's something that I think as a reporter that I discovered, and that is Florida has the Sunshine Act, meaning that public records are public. And that means you can go to a police department and you can actually get access to a police report, and you can know details that come out immediately. Whereas, say, in Massachusetts, it might take 6 months to learn about this. And so a lot of the news that we have here, maybe, of course, we're a big state. You know, Florida's gigantic.
Yeah.
And it may be that there are some strange oddities, you know, things that stand out in Maine, in Massachusetts, in Wyoming. We don't know about those immediately because the public records are so open in our state that we do know about them.
And news is a world of immediacy, and being able to get information quickly versus another state where you would have to wait 4 to 6 months. That's a big part of it. As far as people now, the attention spans are shorter. But
But Florida is it's a unique state. We have weird stuff here. I mean, nowhere. It's just. I mean, I can remember doing a story. It's a horrible story about a man who high on some drug who ended up chewing off somebody else's face. I mean, that just doesn't happen.
Was that the bath salt story?
It wasn't. It was. And there's another story of a guy with a machete chopping somebody's head off down in Miami.
I remember that one as well.
Here's another story. This just doesn't happen. Down in Miami, we have the Metro Mover, and it's self-contained, driving around, you know, gives you little rides to where you need to go.
Yep.
Not the Metro Rail, but the Metro Mover. And one day somebody found a shark, a shark that had just been caught on the Metro Mover. Where does that happen? And that is just too weird, and that becomes news.
Weird Florida news.
Yeah.
It never ends. It's always happening in real time, and that's why I think a lot of folks around the world they can't believe some of the headlines that come out of the state of Florida. I want to get to some of the viewer questions that are coming in. We're going to do that first, but I want to play a little game with you, Kerry. We're going to play a little game.
All right.
We're going to go rapid fire.
All right.
And first story, you've covered thousands of stories probably in your career. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you an emotion. That's how the game is going to work. I'm going to give you an emotion, and then the first story that comes into your mind when I give you this emotion.
Okay.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start. The emotion of being overjoyed.
Overjoyed. I got to say, personally, it was the liberation in Baghdad because that was the first time I could exhale. I know that the American Marines that I was with were overjoyed, but I
Sure.
was personally overjoyed to think that I had survived what they went through because I was right alongside them. And there were many days I wasn't sure. Let's put it this way. I lost 17 pounds during that embedded time. And that was not for a lack of eating. MREs have a lot of calories. It was worry. I worried that weight right off.
The emotion of being in pure and utter shock.
Pure and utter shock. I think probably the greatest moment that I was in utter shock would be,
Like you just cannot believe that this was reality.
I predicted this, but I think I was still in shock that my prediction was true, that Casey Anthony would walk in the murder of
Huge story.
her daughter, Kaylee Anthony. I had predicted it, but I was still shocked because I was like, wow.
Uh, a story where you were humbled.
I think probably the moment that humbled me the most was I did a story about a service member who had lost his eyesight when an IED exploded.
Wow.
And in the loss of his eyesight, he was somebody who went out and actually diffused bombs, so he knew the danger. But to lose your eyesight is horrible. Then in a very random occurrence, he got a virus that stole his hearing.
Oh my goodness.
So he couldn't see and he could not hear. And he was trapped. He was truly in a prison. And he had an opportunity to reconnect with an old friend, and she began to write letters in the palm of his hand so that he could understand what she was saying and move the story forward. They got married. They have children.
Yeah, it's pretty special.
And she encouraged him to do something with his life. And EOD is what they call it in the military, explosive ordnance disposal. And he became a candy maker, and he started EOD, which is Extraordinary Delights. And he went from being trapped in his body to becoming a success and a partnership and a father. And I got to tell you, you just don't expect that.
Yeah,
You know,
that is a story that'll humble you real fast. How about a story where you were scared out of your mind?
that's definitely the many conflicts that I was in. I already mentioned Iraq, but I can tell you that when I was in Kosovo, and so when Kosovo was liberated, I was exhausted. I was just, well, I can even take you further back before then because this is a good moment. We're in Belgrade before I got down to Kosovo. And you have to cross bridges to get from point A to
Are we
point
talking
B.
like Indiana Jones types bridges, like bridges? What kind of bridge are we talking about here?
Regular bridges, the kind
Okay.
of bridges you drive your car over.
Oh, okay, that kind of bridge.
And
okay.
so we're in a bridge at the beginning to cross over in the car. And Tom Bear, bless his soul, is not with us anymore. Tom Bear and I would be in the car, and we would like sit there and look at each other because the U.S. was bombing, and that's a target. And you're just a car going across the bridge.
And you don't
we'd
know if
sit
it's
there
gonna
and look
go.
at each other, and we'd go, "What do you think?" We'd rev the engine, throw it into first gear, and go across the bridge as fast as we could, and made it over there. That was scary, only to be bested by the liberation down in Kosovo when we were there. I was sound asleep. I don't know how I was sleeping through it, but I was exhausted. And as the liberation came with the Russians arriving, it was more gunfire, and more bombs exploding. I mean, it was really the kind of stuff you see in the movies. And we were in a hotel that we were set up in Pristina. And as we were there, and the army that was being defeated there, as they were leaving, they decided, turns out they were in the basement with their operations center. We didn't know that. They set the place on fire.
Wow.
And so I'm in the building, in the hotel, where I'm doing my live reports, and the building's on fire.
My goodness.
And I've just woken up from a daze because I was sound asleep and everything's going on. So that incredibly frightening. And it just, everybody has their fear. My one fear happens to be fire. So it was just everything wrong at that moment. But thankfully we got out safely.
We'll lighten it up here a little bit. How about a story where you were on, I mean, we've been seeing some clips here, and some great stories that you have done over the years, but a story where you were just high on adrenaline, just a pure adrenaline rush. I know you're a diver. I am also a diver. Love being underwater, but what was your biggest, give me a thrill.
You know, Mother Nature can be so amazing, and the opportunity to see things that you can't imagine you would see. So there is this time when the moon is full and you're underwater. Hang on, let me take a little water here.
Yeah, sure. Everybody, we're live with Kerry Sanders on WFLA Now. Stand by. I'll say hi to some folks here in the comment section, because what we're going to do is we're going to be taking your questions and your comments here in just a moment. So if you have a question for Kerry, we're going to be lining it up here on screen if you use hashtag #HeyKerry or hashtag #HeyJB.
So we were invited to join some scientists down in the Florida Keys, where they believed that the temperature was right, the full moon would be happening, and at about 20 to 30 feet below the surface, we would be able to see corals spawning, releasing millions of these. They look like bubbles. Now, at the time we went, it had this is decades ago. It had never really been filmed, and so we had to. This is before the technology we have today, where you can
with
just
underwater cameras and so on and so forth.
All this kind of stuff. We had to engineer a camera that was going to work. We had to figure out how we were going to light it, because the moon is sending some sort of signal to the coral, but it's not enough light to light up for a camera. And so we figured this all out, got down there, and we're literally just sitting at the bottom, breathing, hoping our tanks are going to have enough air. And then this moment happens where it spawned. And it was like magic. I felt like I had seen something, and we recorded something that had so rarely been seen, and was one of these moments where, like, I just saw this. You saw something.
You were a witness.
Truth, and you know, obviously Mother Nature's been doing this forever, but man has not been seeing it. These scientists knew and thought they had figured it out, and there we were to take it all in. So truly a moment that will stick with me. You know, and Mother Nature has many of those moments, and now we see a lot of it on YouTube. It's real easy. But if I take you back decades, and to be there, to literally be there, looking at your tank, going, do I have enough air? How am I going to do? Is it going to run out?
Guys, we're talking to someone who's jumped out of airplanes. We're talking to somebody who has traveled to corners of the world that few have, and we're talking about a moment of adrenaline. And the first thing that comes to mind is you being 20 to 30 feet underwater in the Florida Keys, right here in Florida.
Yeah.
And seeing this miraculous natural moment.
I've since seen it, you know, and obviously technology is better and everything else. Still a really special moment. And if you're a diver, you understand that when you are underwater there, even though you have buddy divers, you're in your own little world.
Oh, sure.
And to be there, the only thing you hear is the regulator sound, and you're looking at this, and you're anticipating, and then to actually witness it is, you know, it truly is, you know, the Wizard of Oz. We pulled the curtain back and took a look at something that really hadn't seen before.
That's really special. I got two more for you. We'll have a little fun here. A story, a story where you were embarrassed. Had an embarrassing moment.
This is
Let's do it.
Okay. I am not a sports guy.
Okay.
I don't know anything about sports.
It's honest. You can say that now. You're retired.
I came back from Haiti and was asked to do a story about the Dolphins and how they were going off to some big game. It's always the big game. I don't know anything about sports, so it's good enough. And Don Shula is the coach. And so me and the cameraman are at the airport, and the team's leaving and everything else. And Don Shula is in a wheelchair. and he's kind of hidden. He had a problem with his leg or something. So the cameraman gets a shot, and the PR guy goes, "You can't air that footage." And I'm like, "I can do anything I want. We're the news. You can't stop me from doing this."
Right.
Because you cannot air that footage.
Yeah, you hold your ground.
And started thinking about, why doesn't he want this footage aired? Well, maybe in my mind it's because looks like he's weak, and if the coach is weak, the team is weak, whatever. So about 20 minutes later, the PR guy comes in and he goes, "What if I give you an exclusive interview with Don Shula? Would you air that footage?" And I'm like, "Well, the interview is probably stronger. I don't need the footage. The reason I've got the footage is because all I've got is this. I need an interview."
Right.
And so decide to go with that. Sounds great. So we get there. They bring Don Shula out, and he's leaned up against a wall now, so it can look like his leg isn't a problem. And I realize at this point, I have no idea what questions to ask.
because sports just isn't your thing.
All right. So the quarterback at the time is one of the most famous quarterbacks.
Marino?
Yes.
Dan Marino.
And I say, first question. Now I'm going to the well.
Yep.
Because you're thinking in the moment. And I told you, I don't write out my questions.
You're not, this is just as spontaneous.
Yeah. And I go, do you think it'll be more of an air game or a ground game? I'm thinking in the back of my head. I've heard that question a million times.
Right.
And Don Shula goes, well, clearly you know nothing about our quarterback. Dan Marino had an incredible arm.
Yep.
Next question. Do you have any surprises for the team that you'll be playing? Obvious answer. Well, if I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise. So I've got one more question. I'm thinking, what can I ask him? Let me go back with another cliche question. Do you think weather will be a factor?
Yep.
And he goes, it's an indoor stadium. Thank you very much. Embarrassing.
Yeah, that's
and
you only had those 3 questions.
And it aired.
And it aired. And it aired. Wow. So the indoor stadium question actually was aired on NBC News?
Yeah, so it's just crazy. I mean, think about
funny.
this. So you don't know much, and there you go.
Everyone, it's fun to be able to look back now. I'm sure in the moment you're thinking, my God, that was not one of my finer moments.
No, and I'm embarrassed by it.
It's fun. And last one, and then we're going to start to take your questions, Facebook Live, YouTube Live. We're going to take your questions here coming up in a interactive Q&A with Kerry. The last one, just a story where you were proud. A story to this day when you look back and you say, I am proud to have done that.
I am proud to have done it. Well, you know, this sounds selfish now because
you're allowed to be, though.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to join the Florida Air National Guard. I went up 3 times, but with the Florida National Guard, we went on a real mission, and I got a chance to go in a F-15. And they were doing what's called a CAP mission, flying over a G8 meeting in Georgia. But after that was all done, the pilot, and they all have their call signs.
Yep.
His name was Fester. Like
okay. Yep.
And he decided to give me the real experience of what it's like to be a fighter pilot in a dogfight. And we pulled 8 Gs. Wow. And we did from ailerons to going up as if you're a rocket leaving Earth. We did everything that you can imagine in terms of beating the hell out of your body. And I did not pass out, and I did not throw up.
All right.
And so all I can say
where's the
is
applause button? Here it is.
That's selfish, but I'm proud of that moment.
Kerry Sanders, everybody. All right, starting now, everyone. We have about 8 minutes. 8 minutes for just your questions. And as people type in their questions, I'll ask you one more. But we are going to go to your hashtag #HeyKerry, hashtag #HeyJB questions out of all the different comment sections that I'm monitoring right now here in the Stream Center. I'm going to ask you, what is, of all the different ways the news industry has changed over your career, what is the biggest way that news has changed?
Well, it's a combination of time and technology. You know, everything is more immediate, and the technology allows for it. And so those two are great, but they can actually come into conflict with accuracy. And sometimes it takes a while for something to fully play out. and the demands for immediacy requires almost a caution that what you are looking at and what you're hearing is part of the story that is unfolding. It is not as it was back in those 3/4-inch days where we occasionally could get a live shot with a microwave signal. It is not the same. And it's a caution to the audience that has a greater responsibility now to not literally take the moment that gets put on live or the moment that's put in a tweet and assume that that's the full story.
Because live streaming and the immediacy of news and how a court decision or any moment in time can travel around the globe within seconds, that is something that is still, in the grand scheme of things, and looking back at the last century of how news has evolved, that is still very new, quite with the internet.
And remember that ideally, certainly at NBC, but ideally, reporters bring standards to the presentation as well as some ethics. But anybody with a cell phone and able to stream can do anything they want.
That's right.
And if they are calling themselves a citizen journalist but don't have a set of standards or are proponents of a point of view, you need to be, as the audience, accepting of my job is now to work through that and see whether it's something that is fully accurate.
We got a lot of questions that are coming in. We'll start here. Let's go over to YouTube Live. I think people are still typing, but we'll go over to Facebook Live, and we'll take some questions here from the Facebook Live comment section. We'll start here with Joy. Joy says, #KJB, that Don Shula interview story was hilarious. He needed a sports fan like myself whispering in his ear. LOL. Congrats to Kerry on an amazing career. I've enjoyed this live session. Thank you. Noel says...
And by the way, I should tell Joy that I have covered 7 Super Bowls. And you're thinking to yourself, Kerry just said he doesn't know anything about sports. But the funny thing is whether I'm covering Olympics, which I covered 4, or whether I'm covering 7 Super Bowls, it is the tangential stories that I do, the human stories, the people stories. And so I know a lot of my friends would be very jealous and had told me many times, like, I can't believe you're going to the Super Bowl. And I'm like, yeah, it's not about the football. It's about all the other parts of the story that are interesting to me.
About American culture. I mean, and the people that put
and of course,
that.
at an Olympics, you're getting a chance to. I remember doing a story on Eric the eel. Okay, this guy was from Equatorial Guinea. He could barely swim. He had taught himself how to swim in a river where there's crocodiles and in some hotel swimming pool. And then he goes to the Olympics in this program where they allow all nations, even if they're not great athletes, they can present an athlete to participate. And he barely floundered his way through the pool. And Eric the eel became a symbol of hope and success. And I got sent out to do that story. And they said, Kerry, you need to go talk. And I'm like, I don't even know what language they speak in Equatorial Guinea. Fortunately, they speak some English, they speak French, and they speak some Spanish. And I speak Spanish. I was able to put that story together. And it's one of those moments where you're like, this guy was like, he was like a beginner in a swimming class, but he was in the Olympics, and what a great story. So there I am, covering the Olympics, but not the story about, hey, here's Phelps, he got 7 gold medals or whatever it was.
The Olympics, the Super Bowl, some of the best stories are the human interest stories that are attached to it. There's no doubt. Noel wants to know, what advice do you have? #Hey Kerry, what advice do you have for a young journalist?
Well, first of all, you need to understand that you have to have passion and commitment. So I can take you back to my first job I mentioned in television in Jacksonville, Florida. At the time, the minimum wage was $3.35 an hour, and that's what I got paid. And I was there for about 7 months. And then I landed another job in Fort Myers at a station, and my pay went to $3.35 an hour. And you have to want to do this for many reasons other than the paycheck. Journalism is all-consuming. It has to be something that you want to do. You will miss birthdays. You will miss Christmases. You will miss Thanksgivings. You will miss so many things that society says you need to be able to participate in. But on the flip side is you will do things that nobody else gets a chance to do. So I find the greatest challenge among the young journalists that I was working with is the understanding that this is not a 9-to-5 job. You don't work Monday through Friday. This is all the time. Your phone rings. You must be ready to go wherever it is, down the street or to the airport, literally in 15 minutes.
Yep. So the sacrifice.
But it's the passion. It needs to be the passion. It needs to be something that you absolutely want.
Young reporters are going to see the glamour of it, right?
That glamour
is so overplayed, is it
well,
not?
it is. It's fleeting. And, there's a real challenge right now because a lot of people who are doing television reporting are spending a lot of time on TikTok and, looking at their 100,000 followers, like somehow that has value. And maybe it does, but I'm not sure it has the value in the reporting world. You may find that you have a way to turn that into money for yourself by, whether you're showing a purse or wearing a different type of tennis shoes or whatever it is.
Right.
But that is not what journalism is really the calling. The calling is about, putting the light in the darkness, telling other people's stories, sharing what somebody, it's that voice that never gets heard that is really the goal of the reporter, to then give that person some amplification so that people can hear that and go, wow, I never even thought about that. And it's not, there is fame that comes with it. It's fleeting, but it's also an incalculable value. There's not much to it. So people recognize you on the street. I'm always honored when somebody says, hey, you're Kerry Sanders.
Yeah.
But that is not a true value. That is just something that it makes me feel good that somebody is watching and knows that I'm the one who've done the story.
And that you were memorable, because the word that was taught to me as a young reporter is that you try to present stories in a way that are memorable to people. And so if somebody remembers you on the street, it means that you are doing your job, being a journalist, and doing something that to them was memorable at the time.
Right.
And maybe especially when someone runs into you on the street, not only do they say, hey, you're Kerry Sanders, but sometimes you'll get the person who will say, I remember your reporting in Iraq. I want to just say it really resonated with me. It means the world to me. And then they thank you, because then it's not really about the fame. It's about how you were documenting something and it meant something to them, and they remember it all those years later.
I remember being in the at Reagan International in Washington and just going out to my plane, and somebody's walking the other direction, and they stopped me and they said, Kerry Sanders, I just want to say your job and what you're doing is more important to our country than ever. Journalism matters, and thank you. Yeah. And I was like, wow.
Special. I'm really glad that we have this one coming in from Natalie, because you and I could probably spend a few hours in here, but we have to go here in a couple minutes. Natalie says, hashtag hey Kerry, no question. As a Hurricane Andrew survivor, I wanted to say thank you. We have gotten, we're 48 minutes into the stream, and we have not brought up Andrew or storms yet, and we only have a few minutes left. So I'm going to just really quickly ask you, is Andrew the worst storm that you have been through? Having been through 100+ named storms, that one is different. Is
Andrew was remarkable. That I survived is just the stroke of luck. I had been in Homestead I'd been in Homestead in the car with a cameraman, me and Steve Schneider. And the only reason we drove out of because we were going to ride it out in the car, was because there were no lights. A smaller town at the time back then. We drove up a little bit further north, and we got stuck in our car under the Metro Rail.
Is this it right here? Is this it right here?
That's it. I'm on the floorboards of the car giving the report. And the aftermath of Andrew was truly, it was truly beyond the imagination, in that we had so much destruction and we just did not know what to expect. And, that was the Category 5 storm that has become the milepost for all storms. I was almost killed in Hugo when I was arriving in Charleston, and my cameraman, Jim Craven, was ahead of me, and I was behind him, and I was carrying the tripod, and we were arriving as the storm was hitting. I never do this. It was a late start. We shouldn't have gotten there, but we got there as it was hurricane was hitting, and we went up to this circular Holiday Inn, and he's trying to make his way in, and I'm walking behind him, and there's these planters, and the planters were with giant areas below them that were below the surface, and they'd filled up with water. And as I was walking, I fell into that tub of
Wow.
water,
Yep.
and I was screaming, "Jim, Jim!" And there was no way he could hear me to get me out. The water was rising, and so I used the tripod as sort of a third leg, and I put it
To
on the
prop yourself
land,
up. Yep.
propped myself. We got up, and I caught up to him, and we started banging on the sides of the Holiday Inn, and nobody would let us in because to the people inside, it sounded like coconuts and other things hitting. So we decided we would do a rhythmic, because there's no way Mother Nature would have a rhythmic tapping. And so we did rhythmic tapping, and they realized there must be somebody out there, and they let us in. That one, I mean, I could have easily died in that one. And then Hurricane Mitch down in Central America, where the death toll was actually incalculable. It's the same way that we had Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas, where they don't really know how many people died. Horrible, but endless amount of hurricanes that I've been through. And I would always say to people, "Kerry, should I stay? Should I leave?" I go, "Do you have the money to leave?" And if they'd say yes, I'd say, "Then leave." There is nothing you can do during a hurricane to protect your home. People have this crazy idea that they can hold the door.
Right. Yeah.
You can't. Just leave. If you don't have the money, go to a shelter or get yourself in a safe location. And on the back end, know how miserable it'll be.
Some of the highlights here of that story, the series of reporting that Kerry and his photographer did on Hurricane Andrew back in 1992. That's what you're seeing play here on your screen. We have one more question from our guests, and then we have I'm going to end with one final question. Michelle on YouTube, this is a great question, wants to know #HeyKerry, if you didn't go into journalism, what other career would you have explored?
I actually have wondered this. It's a very good question.
A fun question, and thank you to one of our moderators, Michelle Widener, for asking.
So when I was with the Marines, embedded with them, I learned something that I did not know. With all the Marines, there is the Navy Corpsman, and the Navy Corpsman is the one who has no weapons. They are the ones that are providing the first aid in the combat. And I think I was so impressed with the courage as well as the important role that Navy Corpsman plays for the person in war, because I saw them immediately treating wounded people and wounded Marines, as well as actually the enemy, because they're selfless. I think that probably would be something that I might have pursued. I didn't even know about it. It was one of those things that you know nothing about until one day you're there and you're like, wow, what is this job?
Extraordinary. We only have 60 seconds left, and I have to get in this one question because it's a little bit, it's something that I wanted to ask you because you've seen the world of journalism transform so much over the years. Interactive journalism is something that is very much a passion of mine. The concept, and for folks that do not know what interactive journalism is, that means that it's a two-way street. It's not just the reporter delivering information, the anchors delivering information, the news personalities delivering information to you, but then also you being able to provide feedback. Exactly what we're doing here.
Right.
Taking questions, answering questions, people bringing up observations. The back and forth two-lane communication is what interactive journalism is all about. I just wanted to ask you about it and your viewpoint on it before we wrap up here on WFNL.
I love it because that's what I was doing my whole career, if you think about it, interactive. So part of what we would say is go out and get some MOS, man on the street.
That's right.
What's happening now is technology is allowing that to happen in real time. But as a reporter, your goal is to go out and listen to as many different points of view.
That's right.
And what I did was I synthesized. This is a beautiful opportunity to have a nice long conversation with you. But if you're tuning into the news, take out the commercials, you're talking about 23 minutes of time on the evening newscast for the news. And that's why everything is compressed. And so a 20-second response to an answer might be pushed down to 7 seconds.
That's right.
And everybody knows the word soundbite. We do that to give you the packaging of all the news of the day in a finite period of time so you can do it. But what is happening now, because of streaming, because of YouTube, because of everything that we're participating in right now, it allows for the raw back and forth. And I can tell you as a reporter, there were many days where I would call the senior producer, the executive producer, I said, can I have another 10 seconds, please? I want to give this person just a little bit more time. And I'm up against a correspondent who is maybe in Ukraine right now saying, I need another 10 seconds.
Right.
You can't make this, you can't make time any longer than it is. And so that's the back and forth. So this interactive journalism, it's what's always been there. Now it's a little bit more, you know, you see the sausage being made, which I think is pretty good.
Kerry Sanders, who, of course, is so special to us here at WFLA because his reports have been airing on our airwaves for many, many years. Congratulations to you, on an unbelievable career. You, your wife, Deborah, you guys are going to have so many more joyous days ahead. And I'm sure that the storytelling for you might be over in a capacity when it comes to broadcasting on television. But I know just from our conversation here today, both before we got on stream and on stream, you're going to be telling stories for many, many days going forward. It's an honor to be here with you. Just a tremendous opportunity, and I'd like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming in today.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
All right, everybody, Kerry Sanders. If you want to read more about Kerry's incredible career, you can do so right now on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. Kerry's doing more with us here in the building today at WFLA in Tampa Bay, so we got to get going. Again, the very latest on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. From the Stream Center, Kerry Sanders, JB Buno, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on WFLA Now.